With your iPhone and Android SDKs installed, you're almost ready to create your first project in Titanium Developer. However, you will first need to go to the profile perspective and set up a profile on Appcelerator.com. If you're developing for the Android, you'll also need to specify the location where you installed the Android SDK. You can now click New Project, select Project Type Mobile, and verify that the SDKs you're building for have been found. If not, you'll need to go take steps to address that before you continue. Now I'm going to give our project a name. I'm going to use Fortune Crunch like the original. We'll point out that one thing I found is that Titanium with a capital T in the name causes problems for the iPhone build. Titanium with a lowercase t does seem to work. I'm going to avoid that altogether, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Your app ID just needs to be any unique string. If you're developing for the iPhone and going to release in the Apple Store, this needs to be your Apple provisioning ID. Typically this is a namespace URL, so top level domain, second level domain, and then a string. If you don't have a domain, you can maybe use a handle. I go by JFS III, so I could use JFS II Fortune Crunch. And now we see another issue, which is that underscores aren't valid in app IDs. I do own jfsii.org, so I'm going to use that as my app ID. Your directory can be anything. Mine are under Sites Titanium. Company or personal URL. If you don't have a URL, you can get around that by using any character. I'm going to use my Twitter profile. And here you'll see all the info we entered on the last screen. You've got the ability to enter some other information, your description, a default icon to use on the load screen. But for the moment, I'm going to get right to building because it does take a moment to build these initially. Now, when you go to build, you have your choice of what SDK to build against. I chose 3.1, 3.12, or 3.13 would work just as well. I've had issues building with 3.2 and have a report in to the people at Appcelerator, so hopefully I can find out more about that. For the moment, we're going to use 3.1. Filter filters the log messages to show the types that are listed there: info, debug. Toggle output will show the output of the Xcode build. Android, you have something similar, build against any version, 2.1, 2.0. 1.6 is the oldest API you can build against in Titanium. I'm going to choose 2.1 because it's new enough. 2.2 is the Froyo release, which I don't believe anybody has. I'm also building against QVGA. That resolution is the closest to the iPhone, which is why I'm using it at the moment. I don't know what the various resolutions are, their distribution across various Android phones, but we can build, and I will check against other resolutions later. At this point, it looks like the Android app should be up and running, and here you'll see tab 1, I am window 1, and a second tab 2, I am window 2. So that's it, a very simple sample application. Looking at the iPhone app, it's not running. Looks like there was an issue initially with this parent window, so I've experienced something like this before. I'm going to click launch again because it is available to me. And here we go. Similar 2-tab window, or 2-tab application, single window. Here we do have a title bar. Tab 1, I am window 1, tab 1. Tab 2, I am window 2, tab 2. There you go, your first sample applications in iPhone and Android. With the Fortune Crunch project created, you're nearly ready to start writing some code in Titanium. The last thing you'll need to do, if you haven't already done so, is get the images that Mark Hammonds uses in the Introduction to iPhone SDK Development tutorial. You get those from iStock Photo, resize them to 300 pixels wide, and then save them in your project folder under the Resources directory as Close Cookie and OpenCookie.jpg. Then go to your favorite text editor and open up Resources, App.js. So for us, it's Sites, Titanium, Fortune Crunch, Resources, App.js. I'm going to save app.js as app.orig.js just so I can refer back to that and look at some of the methods that were used, the API methods that were used initially. You can also get documentation on the methods at developer.appcelerator.com. Let's get into writing some code though. So first thing we need to do is create a window. You can get that by doing Titanium or TI. There's an alias to Titanium called TI. So ti.ui.createWindow, and we'll give it a background color of white. We'll then need to create the close cookie image, and that's ti.ui.createImageView. We need to tell it where to find the image, and that's URL, which is relative to the resources directory. Ours are in the resources directory, so it's just closed cookie.jpg. And we also need to tell it the height and width to use. We just want it to use the height and width that we've already saved as. We don't want to scale those images, so we'll just use width, auto, and height, auto. Only thing left to do is add it to the window and open the window. There's a cookie image. Now the next step is to show the open cookie when somebody clicks on the close cookie. So let's create the open cookie image, which is nearly identical to close cookie. Key difference being the name and the fact that we want this to be hidden by default. We don't want to have both images on the screen at the same time. So that is done by doing visible false. And now we just need to show it when somebody clicks on the close cookie. You can do that by using standard JavaScript event handling. So that's closed cookie.add event listener click, and we'll create a function handler, an event handler called open cookie. Open cookie is an event handler, so receive an event as an argument. And all we want to do is hide the closed cookie and show the open cookie. Also need to add the open cookie to the window. Let's go see what that gives us. I'm actually going to launch the Android one first because it takes a little longer for that emulator to get going. Go back to the iPhone, stop the existing one, launch. Don't worry about that warning about open cookie being used before it was defined. It'll still work. Here's our close cookie. Click on it, there's our open cookie. And let's see what we have in Android. Let's see what the messages are from Android. Nothing at the moment, which means launching application. Here it comes. Close cookie. Click on it. There's our open cookie. So we've now done step one, show a closed cookie, show the open cookie when somebody clicks on it. The only thing left to do to make this app feature complete with the original Fortune Crunch app is actually display a fortune. Displaying the fortune is easy enough. Positioning the fortune does take a little bit of thought. I'm going to take a moment to explain why. If I just created a label and added it to the window, it would display centered in the viewport. There are positioning options available to you, just like you have in CSS positioning of top and left. However, those position relative to the item's parent, which if I just added to the window would be the parent. So if I were to set a top of 150 and a left of 50, that might line up properly in one viewport, but on another viewport it might not appear in the correct place. What we want to do is position the label relative to the image. The easiest way to do that is to wrap a container around the image place the image and the label inside of that, and then do our positioning relative to that container so that it'll always appear in the same place. Regardless of the viewport, the positioning is relative to the image. Let's take a look at some code. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm now going to use OpenCookie to represent that container. So I'm going to ti.ui.create view, and I'm going to call this opened cookie image. Okay, the create view, we just want to give it the same dimensions as the image itself. We want this to be as tight a wrapper as it can be. So while before we declared we just used auto for the height and width, here we're going to actually call out the dimensions of the open cookie image. And this will be hidden by default, much like we had done with the cookie image initially, which means we can now show the cookie image because we don't want to toggle that, we want to toggle the container which contains the image. So we now have the container, the cookie, and the place where we're doing the bulk of the work is the fortune paper, the label, and that is ti.ui.create label. And we need to set some basic properties like color and some font properties. Font size of 12, font family, do Courier, it's a good monospace font that should be available on all platforms. I'm going to give it an explicit height, or a width I should say, of 150 pixels because that's how wide the paper portion of the image is. Height I'm going to leave as auto, so it's only as tall as it needs to be. Now top and left are specific. These are going to be specific to the way that you cut your image up. 80 and 55 should work, but you might need to adjust them to make the label appear in the proper place for you. But once you've adjusted them, it should work on all. Text align left because I want the text to appear at the left part of the image. I now just need to add those items to the container. So opened cookie gets the open cookie image as well as the fortune cookie, the fortune paper. We'll also need to actually display the fortune set that. And with that, we should be ready to deploy. Launch Android first. Stop the iPhone and launch that. Here's our close cookie. Click on it. Happy mobile hacking. Wait a moment for the iPhone app to come up. The Android app to come up. And there you go. Happy mobile hacking. We are now at the same place we were with the original Fortune Crunch app. We've got a very simple new version of a Hello World.